Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the audio drama script for the book The Battle of Jedha by George Mann. Now, this book came out in its original audio-only form in January, and so a lot of people I know have already read it, and they've already reviewed it and all that type of stuff. I'm a print book fan. I only read print books. The only exceptions I have are if a very close friend of mine is writing a book and I'm part of their reading group, I'll read an ebook. Or if I'm rereading one of my absolute favorite novels of all time, I'll occasionally go to audio. But those are incredibly rare exceptions, like 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 for me. So I have to do print, because print's how I read and how I retain information. So I had to wait a whole month. Now, thankfully, it was only a 1 month wait from when the original print book, or from when the audiobook came out to when the print book came out. I believe that when they had Do True Jedi Lost came out, it was like a 4 or 5 month wait. Same with the Dr. Aphra book, and the previous one, I think the last one, Tempest Runner, was the longest wait. Anyway, so this one was only a 1 month wait. So I will admit it wasn't that much of a wait. So I do appreciate Random House for getting on top of that. And I think that if they keep moving in the direction they're going, maybe eventually they'll get to the point where they release them on the same day. Please do that, Random House, please. By the way, I will point out this is the first Random House Worlds book for Star Wars that has been published. They may have published already this year other Random House Worlds novels. I haven't seen them, and I haven't followed any of the series that might be part of it, but this is the first I've followed. But it's still the same team that works at Del Rey that's produced Star Wars novels. But speaking of previous audio drama scripts, the last one to come out was the only other High Republic audio drama script, and that is Tempest Runner, which I read and reviewed on the channel last year. You can check out that review by searching my name and the title of the book, Tempest Runner. I thought this was a superb audio drama. I thought it was so entertaining. I thought that it basically focused too much on a single individual character, so it didn't tell a big enough High Republic story, but at the same time, it told a complete, full, entertaining story in and of itself, so it was pretty good. So, the bar was pretty high for George Mann, but George Mann went into a very different direction, whereas Tempest Runner is a very individualized book. Of course, Lorna D comes from other books and stuff, and her has impact from other stories. It's largely self-contained. The Battle of Jedha, however, is like an epic crossover event for the High Republic. Now, the High Republic has moved on to Phase 2, which is set, about 150 years before Phase 1, which was a very controversial decision, and one that, at the time, people complained about, including me. But I think it was not a terrible decision, because the books they have produced since then have been great, particularly because the crew they've brought in, the new authors, have been great. The first book we had was a surprise. It was Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. And a lot of us were like, why are you doing the YA book first? It doesn't make sense. You should be doing the adult novel first. You always do the adult novel first, and the YA book comes later. Well, they decided to kick off the Phase 2 with this book, and it's a pretty small-scale book, but it's very entertaining. I think it's the best YA book in the High Republic series, and I now completely understand why they decided to kick it off with that book. We also got other books. We got The Quest for the Hidden City, also by George Mann, which is a middle grade, and then we got, that one was pretty good, and then we got Convergence, which I really liked. Now, there were some problems with the storytelling aspect of Convergence that I didn't like. A lot of the plot, there were plot elements I didn't like. But this book, the biggest complaint we had with the High Republic previous books was the cast was just too large. It was just too hard to understand the characters and to follow it all. It was too much. They were throwing too much at you, trying to expect you to learn too much. And then the fact that they asked us to go back 150 years, it was too much. But then we got this book, and this book starts a big story, but it dramatically reduced the cast. And so I appreciated what it did. And also it told a pretty good story about the battle, the war between Aaronroch and Ariam. I do not know how to pronounce them because I'm a print book version, not an ebook version. But anyway, it tells that big epic story. And then all three of these books combine into the Battle of Jedha, which is like the big crossover event. I think if you're a minimalist, you're trying to read things but not be too overwhelmed, I think that Convergence is probably the most important book to have read. And I would say that if you're willing to branch out a little bit, I think that Path of Deceit is also one that's worth it. However, if you're a completionist or if you just want to get a full story, I think that all three of these are valuable. Perhaps one of the biggest problems with Phase 1 of the High Republic was it felt like each book had little ties to the other books, but it didn't feel like they were properly crossing over in the way they were supposed to. It didn't feel like we were getting crossover event books. We would have characters that might cross over, but it didn't feel like a true Avengers level crossover, and that's what we needed. Instead, we were getting like Hulk showing up in Thor Ragnarok, that type of thing where a single character or a couple of characters will show up in another character's movie or something, but we needed the big epic crossover where it feels like all the plot lines have been building to this singular thing. And I would posit that the Battle of Jedha does that, but it's not as big as it could go. It's like a taste. It's like, you want a big epic crossover? We'll do it really short here, and then you'll get an even bigger one later. And so this one, it does tell that kind of epic crossover that I wanted, but it's not overwhelming and huge, and it handles everything properly. For example, I'm not going to get into spoilers here, but I'll say one of the Jedi from this book is present in the Battle of Jedha. Some of the villains from Path of Deceit show up in the Battle of Jedha, and the political situation and the general ideas of this phase from Convergence are present in the Battle of Jedha, and also some of the characters are referenced, and some of the Jedi show up. So but it's all building to a head. Everything's been building towards this. They're trying to hold a peace conference on Jedha, but there are forces who do not want the peace conference between Aram and Aaron. I don't know how to pronounce them. I know how to read them, and when I read them, I totally know what it means, but pronouncing them is terrible. Maybe I should get into the audio stuff. Anyway, the peace conference between those two planets is happening, but there are forces who do not want that to happen, and so those forces are doing everything they can to thwart the peace conference. And we've seen this type of story in the Clone Wars episode where Ahsoka is at the conference and she's trying to protect Padme. We've seen this type of story in other science fiction and fantasy stories, even in political thrillers. We've seen this type of story done a lot before, but this book does a good job of balancing different types of characters. There's the two Jedi on this. You have Creighton's son and Kate. I don't know how to say the last name. They kind of are the two political Jedi. They're the two dealing with the conference. And I'd say Creighton's son is probably one of the standout characters in the book. We see a lot from his perspective, and you see the desperation to keep everything together, which is really good. Then you have some other characters. You have the Jedi who is out, Salandra Sho. She is out kind of on the streets dealing with things in Jedha City. And she meets with Guardians of the Wills, and she's meeting with the Path of the Hand, and she's meeting with the people and exploring things in her pilgrimage to Jedha. And then you have the ambassadors, and you have one of the Santekas is present, and then you have the other political people involved, and then you have one of the Church of the Force people who is working with the peace conference. I think that character that from the Church of the Force probably has the most impact on the full story. That was Keth Sarapath, and Keth is the character that he goes on the biggest journey of, like, from the beginning of the book to the middle to the end, where he goes and where he ends up is fantastic. And some of the others have good character journeys. Creighton and Salandra certainly have good character journeys, but I'd say Keth Sarapath has the biggest. There are some droids here, one droid in particular who is one of the Church of the Force droids who only speaks in like epithets. He's hilarious. I assume it's a he. That droid cracked me up throughout the book. Like every line the droid said was just so humorous. And if you understand religious phrases, especially the more ominous ones, you can apply them to the situation. You get the humor a little bit more. So George Mann has a good understanding of how to tell an entertaining Star Wars story. He has a good handle on the High Republic characters and universe. He has a good handle on little Star Wars details, like how to make the droids funny, how to make the Jedi good moral characters, how to make the planet feel like you're understanding it. Almost all of this book takes place in the city on Jedha, in Jedha City. You never really go out beyond the city into like the wildlands that you see in Rogue One. And as much as I would have liked to have seen that, I'm not as much a description person. I'm more of a discussion action person. So reading scripts is a lot of fun for me because I just get to focus almost entirely on dialogue. Yes, I love dialogue. It also is a really quick read. The audiobook for this, I believe, is like under 6 hours, and I usually read about at 2/3, like it takes me 2/3 as long as an audiobook. So if it takes the audiobook 6 hours to read, I might read in like 4, or sometimes maybe even half. I can sometimes half it if I'm really into it, so it's like 3 hours. So it's not a crazy long commitment. If you're getting a hardcover, it's a big price. It's certainly a expensive story to tell for what you're getting. Whereas something like Convergence is a much longer. It's page-wise a shorter story, but in terms of meat and potatoes and plot, it's a much more longer story. And Convergence tells a story that I really enjoyed. Of like the all right, we've got one heir from this and planet, one heir from this planet. Their planets are fighting. What do? We have the heirs marry each other. Like that's just such a great way. That's such a great premise to build off of. This one, it doesn't have the same hook. The hook for this is, there's a peace conference, and the peace conference is going to go to heck. Like, you just know that's what's happening here. So, it's very entertaining. I would say that this is more of like a required reading and really a well worth it. Like, if you've read the other High Republic books, you will feel catharsis reading this one because it feels like everything's being paid off, even though it's not. Everything will really be paid off in future stories, and they need to be, otherwise this will actually go down in my estimation. But this is more of like everything's coming to a head. I still think the best audio drama we've gotten is Tempest Runner, because I think it told a full, complete story, and it really was able to get in the heads of the characters that we're following. But I still think Battle of Jedha is well worth it. So that is my review of the Battle of Jedha. If you've read this in its audio, or if you've listened to this, what was the audio drama like? Did you like the voice cast that they got? Or if you've read the print version, did you like the print version? Let me know those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.